Hello, movie enthusiast. I think that's one of my, not new, but like one of my favorite words because I'm pretty sure I'm not pronouncing it correctly, but I love to say it. Enthusiast. That TH is pretty sweet, eh? So, welcome everybody to my weekly movie or series or whatever commentary. Um, where I basically, as far as I know, wait, I mixed up my introduction. But anyways, this is your casual conversation with your friend Carlz, where I take whatever I thought in Spanish and try to put it in English. As always, I'm gonna talk about something that I really care about, and as always, I'm gonna like grow it from what I said back in the Spanish episode. This week I talked about a pretty popular movie from last year called Longlegs, right? Directed by what's his name? I should always keep this on hand. What's his name? Osgood Perkins, starring Nicolas Cage and Micah Monroe. I never care for these details too much because basically they are like just details, right? Like this Wikipedia stuff that you can just Google by yourself, right? But it was a very, very, very popular horror movie from last year. It was in the top 10s or top 20s, whatever you want to call it, for many horror specialized press about it. And okay, so for those of you who don't know, this is a horror thriller. That's another fun word. This is a horror thriller where an FBI agent goes looking or like hunting for this serial killer called Longlegs, like who tends to kill families in a really specific way. So basically, I've been trying to cut down the spoiler amount on my commentaries, but this one I need to spoil it. So apologies if somebody doesn't want Longlegs spoiled. Okay, so I really like this movie, but I always felt that I have some issues with it. What this movie did for me, I guess in the best of ways, was to sort of push me to reflecting on thrillers in general, right? I think probably there's like what 1%, one out of like 20 people do not like thrillers, and that is because thrillers as like type of narrations, right, they have this really fun element to them where they are inviting, whether it be to the audience or like to the reader, they are inviting to us. Like a good thriller, a good story is made in such a way where while you are experiencing it, you feel part of it. It's like, okay, the classic thrillers are always detective stories because you can sort of figure them out, right? Like you feel challenged and like, oh, maybe I could figure out what's going on here. That's why book thrillers are so popular, right? All this Dan Brown and stuff, because you are reading, and thrillers are just way better in book form, like extremely more, like, because if I tell you just a description of what's happening in this case, whichever the case is, right, I'm giving you the free roam to imagine a bunch of stuff. Like, it's much rich in content to imagine many of these things than them just being shown. By them just being shown, you are like sort of limiting what the spectator or like consumer in general can like gather out of whatever you're trying to tell them, right? But anyways, what's the point of this? Basically, thrillers, to me, a good one is one that always balances the mystery, right, with this sort of possibility of you figuring out or like sort of like developing the mystery, right? And even though there are many factors related to this, the main one of these factors is that the clues should somehow allow you to solve the case. What Longlegs did, it took me through like watching a bunch of thrillers and like like, I don't know, experiencing the ones that people say are good. I have some thrillers of my own that are good. Like I already talked before about Blade Runner 2049. Well, the one with Ryan Gosling, right? That's a thriller, only in a sci-fi scenario. You have the whole mystery of who is the hybrid replicant human, right? And even though the movie hints at the possibility of being Ryan Gosling, right? It tried to lead us not only to the solution, but also try to dissuade us of the possibilities of who could it be. But at the end of the movie, when spoiler from Blade Runner, when they revealed that this hybrid was the lady that crafted the dreams for the replicants, even though it might be surprising for some, at the same time, it makes sense. It doesn't feel underhanded. It doesn't feel like something like, I don't know, like out of the blue that it just happens. You know, that lady was related to the whole company about to Jared Leto. To She was related to something key, to a key element of the current replicants in the movie, right? So it was always believable. And you can have, like, for example, one movie that I haven't seen that Longlegs made me see was The Handmaiden, the Korean movie from the same guy that did Old Boy. And then you have a director who did two awesome thrillers. In The Handmaiden, to make a long story short, is this whole like conspiracy between like the three main characters, right? The handmaiden, the rich woman, and the swindler, or like the guy that just wanted to like screw everybody for money, right? This movie is clearly told in three parts, or like from three perspectives, right? So they overlap. The three perspectives of each of the three characters, right? Not necessarily of the three characters, but like showing like three strings of the same mystery. They overlap. They sort of like show different sides of the same thing, but in the end, turns out you don't really like see from the beginning of the movie where it's going. But nonetheless, the same as with Blade Runner, you sort of kind of like see it at the end when it starts like revealing itself. I was going to say developing itself, but no, it's like when something is wrapped and it's revealed, right? Or like unwrapped. It's the same happened with All Boy. All Boy, one of the best stories and like movies to me, like ever. Like that movie is great. So the genius of All Boy is that this is also a spoiler from All Boy. When the big reveal, not necessarily a spoiler, right? But like when the big reveal happens in All Boy, it's a shocker, right? Like I don't want to spoil it. I will not spoil it. But let's just say that the ending of All Boy reveals a situation that it was like unthinkable. But he's the genius of the narrative thriller in a movie like Old Boy, right? It's plausible, as I said before. So it's a big reveal that you do not expect, but it's plausible. Here's the key: how do you make like the climax or the big reveal of a thriller being sort of understandable, but try to not make it too obvious? If it's too obvious, like it's not a good thriller, right? It's like, yeah, I knew this. If it is too sudden, too underhanded, like too cheap, you go like, what's going on? Why did this happen? This is so strange. And here I'm gonna criticize some things that I don't really like criticizing much, because like, who am I? Just some random bald guy, right? So before going back to Longlegs, let me put another example of this sort of like climax manipulation from a thriller. I remember seeing the movie Shutter Island by Martin Scorsese when it came out in movies, like in the theaters, right? And the one feeling that I remember about it is the one that I'm trying to explain. I'm gonna spoil Shutter Island because I don't care that much. But in Shutter Island, the big reveal at the end, they just basically go like, "Oh, this was all a simulation. Haha, let's go, it's done." This is a long movie. It's almost like 3 hours long, right? So when the big reveal comes at the end, they show it like in this exposition barf, like, "Oh, this was because of this was because of that, this was a simulation, you were always sick, blah blah blah." And to me, to this day, it feels so cheap. It feels so cheap to just say, "Yeah, everything that happened wasn't like that, period." So you're sitting there, like either at home or in the theaters, and like you're like, but like I had all of these ideas, like I could have never thought about it. Like, and then you, of course, you gotta ask the question, like, how is that different from what happened in a movie, like in a good one, like Old Boy or Blade Runner? Because it is somehow plausible. And here's the third factor, the one that I was mentioning, and the one that will bring us back to Longlegs. Thrillers are supposed to try to mislead you, right? But whatever they do to try to mislead you, it always hangs on this balance about being too convenient, about being too cheap, like about being like just too absurd. In the case of Shutter Island, they show elements that are supposed to be not real in a way too realistic like manner, right? They don't introduce the idea that the main character might be like quote unquote crazy until like halfway around the movie, and even then, like there's really no reason for you to believe that he could be so. The subtlety by which this is made, it's what makes or breaks the balance in a good thriller. Now, this balance is of course highly subjective, but to me personally, in my own subjective view, some movies do it wrong, and those movies they just like grind my gears, as they say. Shutter Island was one of them, and Longlegs was another one of them. So we finally come back to Longlegs, right? As I said, one of the things that I didn't like and one of the ideas that I want to like work on is the idea that the thriller, the turn, like in poker terms, right? Like the big reveal, the big twist at the end, is not appropriately done in the movie. Here we go fully into spoiler territory, right? The big reveal in Longlegs has one particular character that really brings down the movie a lot for me, which is the supernatural sort of character. In the end, turns out that in Longlegs there's some of like demonic or evil manipulation that makes the parents kill their family. So Longlegs himself, he didn't do anything. He just crafted these demonically possessed dolls. Like they would bring them to the family, and they would get like sort of like possessed by the devil and like got into some weird sort of trance. So when they revealed this, way late on the in like during the climax of the movie, right? When they revealed this is the key for you to like really enjoy or not the movie. How much do you believe this? And here's where I sort of like have issues with Longlegs, because the movie does like really explicit efforts to dissuade you of this. And as I said, this is something good thrillers should try to do. But the way you find this balance, as I said again, will make or break how much you enjoy the movie. And for example, during Longlegs, there are parts or elements of it that to me were really distracting. First of all, the what was the name of the main agent or whatever, Lee Harker, right? The true protagonist of the movie. Lee Harker has this sort of like supernatural type of like connection to the case, and like they keep balancing between her abilities or her capacities or capabilities to sort of like sense the supernatural, right? So they have this mix, especially between her and the boss, right? Their FBI boss, and they have this now more than traditional sort of like coming and going between two sides of a police investigation, right? Between the supernatural and like the rational. And I feel like Longlegs does this way too often, like trying to introduce the idea that Harker has some supernatural powers against the reality of it. I believe that boss, even in more than one occasion, goes like try to even to ridicule her, like, oh yeah, of course, like he does it with the help of the devil or whatever, right? I don't believe that. Like, we are FBI officers, like we see reality, we see evidence, and depending on the context of the movie and how like involved you are into it, when they told you that, to me at least, it immediately triggers like an intentional effort to mislead you. So let's sort of like dive in between that. You have the attempt to dissuade you, and you have the context of the movie. And like, how much are you open to that? From the beginning of the movie, at least to me, it always plays out like a serial killer type of thriller, right? Silence of the Lambs or whatever, you like, that sort of movie. So, or Zodiac, even like Fargo or something, right? At each time, at each turn, this whole idea of the supernatural or like the satanic influences of Longlegs, they seems to be just the sprinkle of color and personality to Longlegs as a serial killer himself, which is something that many serial killers have anyways, right? Some, I don't know, self imposed or like some weird beliefs or cult like, I don't know, delusions, right? It seems to be just the personality of Longlegs. But the case and the way the movie portrays itself, it remains a police and serial killer chase and be chased sort of scenario. Here is where like the good things about Longlegs, or the things that sort of I can see try to holding on the movie together, come into play. I think Longlegs cinematography and overall presentation is what keeps it afloat. What do I mean by this? Even though I didn't believe the balance between the clues and the dissuading efforts of the movie were properly made, I still believe the way it was shot, right? The way it was presented, it gave you the possibility of enjoying this sort of the thrill of the thriller, or to enjoy this mystery without necessarily like losing you. So, for example, there are some big long scenes in Longlegs, like when the first Longlegs sort of like goes to Harker's house and like leaves her a letter, right? That's a big long scene that it's like 100%, like to create context, right? And it's shot like a horror scene. It has this paranoia effect. It has this way of shooting it where like you never really fully see what's going on. The movie is filled with these really wide shots that, as a thriller, like, you gotta use these wide shots. You get these wide shots in the movies, in a thriller specifically, and every thriller enthusiast or like viewer is gonna go like, oh, like, yeah, I'm gonna see all of these details, right? this shot is so wide. There must be something here that I'm looking like I'm looking here like there must be a clue. Even if there is no clue, you still believe that you can see some, and that's sort of like the whole game, right? So, what is the point with this? If you create like a really decent enough like overall feel for the movie, it remains enjoyable. And that is the case with Longlegs. Most of it remains enjoyable because the way it's presented as a whole, it just works. And here's like, if you remember at the beginning, that I said that there was a second element of the movie that I didn't like. So this second element requires some disclaimer. Here's my disclaimer. I'm a Nicolas Cage enthusiast. I proposed myself years ago. Like, this guy is so awesome that I'm gonna watch every movie he's in, like, ever. Like, I have my. It's not a PDF. It's like an Excel file. I have it written down. Which ones I have seen, which one I'm yet to see, which ones are coming up, and this has some good. Well, I mean, some good things and some bad things. The good things is that you see plenty good movies. Matchstick Men, Adaptation, Pig, Lord of War, right? Yeah. Um, what else? Mandy was okay, you know. But the downside is that you see a lot of crap. But that's not the main point with it. The main point with it is that part of me seeing Longlegs was that Nicolas Cage was in it. And Nicolas Cage has this thing that, like, it's unavoidable that he's gonna become the center of attention, whether you like it or not. Longlegs as a character in the movie is not that prominent. It's not like such a big deal in the movie, right? But I'm saying that the strength of Longlegs is creating this overall context of dread and like sort of like there is an assassin, but it gives you the possibility in your mind of like a probable supernatural source to it. That is the general vibe and the context of the movie, right? That gives it some strength. In that context, you could say that there's one thing that breaks this like well enough crafted supernatural or like the possibility of supernatural context. The one thing that surprisingly breaks this is Nicolas Cage. Like, I don't have time to like create or like sort of construct a whole like cage. I call it the cage-o-meter, right? That goes like between being crazy and whatever, right? But the point is, Nicolas Cage is such a strong character, and he's been parodied and commented so much, like in so much media, that basically he honors that, that saying, being larger than life. I think that's a phrase that serves like as a perfect representation of Nicolas Cage. Now, what is the wrong, like the bad thing about this? Nicolas Cage often appears on screen, and he is Nicolas Cage. Like, this is no poetry or anything. Like, in Longlegs, Nicolas Cage appears with this ridiculous makeup, right? Trying to pretend that he's some psycho possessed by the devil, right? But when you see him in the movie, when you hear him in the movie, and when you see him performing in the movie, it's not so much like a serial killer possessed by the devil to me. To me, it's just Nicolas Cage. you know? Like this is no small matter, because he appears on the screen and he does the, I don't know, classic Nicolas Cage wails, like he goes like he goes like that. He have this weird sort of like moments with himself. The whole performance of Nicolas Cage in Longlegs is awfully distracting. Awfully distracting. Because it's just Nicolas Cage. Like, why would you cast Nicolas Cage just to be Nicolas Cage? That is like the main thing. He really doesn't add anything. You could argue that the whole point of the movie or the star of the movie is Lee Harker, right, the FBI agent. You could argue that, but Nicolas Cage is such a strong presence that to me it just absorbs, like it takes over all of your attention. It's crazy. And when he does get your attention, he breaks it by just being Nicolas Cage and doing some weird crazy stuff that you might as well see or like imagine him doing in regular life, in daily life. That's crazy. So we go back to the whole point about a thriller surviving by either this capacity of absorbing you as an spectator and giving you clues, right? We mix this with creating a good ambiance, a good context, right? So it can give you like different sort of like thriller scenarios, sci-fi, horror, fantasy, like what even is like a movie like The Prestige, right? Christopher Nolan's The Prestige, which it's also a thriller, right? Can give you many options, right? But when you are in one of them, you gotta keep the balance. And when you have elements such as Nicolas Cage disrupting it, by the end of the movie, when you have the big reveal, like sadly with Longlegs, I felt cheated, and that's it. And even though you had a good like overall construction of this thriller like sphere, you end up with this turn at the end. It leaves you with like a bad taste in the mouth. Like that is the big issue. Like, it leaves you with like like you taste and you're like yum, yum. Sorry, I was hydrating. It leaves you this sensation that like you were cheated and everything that happened before, it's sort of like lame. And you think about stuff like, for example, in Longlegs, there is this whole part of the investigation that drives Harker into like trying to think why did Longlegs killed during certain dates and during like certain birthdays, right? So as serial killer investigations go, you start seeing the patterns and like, okay, what does this pattern means? When she does the big reveal about this sort of satanic triangle thing, right? You might start seeing like the real intentions behind the movie, like to introduce you into this supernatural mindset. Oh, he's killing because of some satanic belief. But immediately after that, the movie tries to put that down. The movie tries to play it down, like to ignore it. So I hope I'm explaining myself like in the best way possible. This sort of like balance is so important and is so delicate that it can make or break your experience. And that is like the main issue here. If I want to see Longlegs, right? If the thriller is not good, if the thrill, the seek of the solution is not solid enough, okay, I'm gonna rely on its horror elements. Then you go to the horror elements, and of course they get half explained, right? Because you don't solely focus on the supernatural, because you want to leave some for the detective side there, right? So you don't get a chance to fully immerse you in it. To me, the best thrillers are the ones that completely focus on something. Be the killer, like be the case, or like be creating this overall ambience that gives the movie its personality. Like I have many examples of it. For example, one that it's about creating like a really good overall context of the movie as you for like to join the thrill, right? Zodiac. So that Zodiac might be one of the best ones. Like you see it with people and like everybody's like, oh, like trying to figure out like seeing how can you say, like clues everywhere, right? You see clues everywhere. You see clues everywhere. I remember watching it with some friends and we're like, yeah, like what could this mean? Like could this be a clue and everything? And it works in many levels, like by choosing a real life case, right? By trying to not focus only in one character, but like give every character a role for you to try to follow. It works great. For example, you have another one that is like the thriller based on character, and probably one of the best ones there is Silence of the Lambs, right? Because it's not only about one character, but like about many that somehow connect each other in such a deep way that all the mysteries of the movie, all the case on the movie, and all of the the violence of it makes them completely like unseparable. That's a word. That's a word, right? Like you can't separate them. So you care deeply about both the detective and the criminal. Both of them, both of their lives and personalities are deep entwined into it. Then you have thrillers that are about the context, like the overall world. And to that, one of the ones that I already mentioned, Blade Runner, right? It's such a magical world that is created in that movie. It looks so alive. It looks so intense. The world itself is full of clues. So inside of that playground, everything that happens, it's not like on, it's not like it's not, how can you say it? It's not on the background, right? The characters and the main plot is not necessarily on the background, but it has this huge, strong, and well crafted playground that even if there are like little details in between the case and the characters that you don't like, you all sort of overlook them because you are thinking bigger, like what it means for like artificial intelligence to be like this, or like what does it mean to achieve this or that. Giving these examples and like taking them back to Longlegs, it doesn't really achieve any of those. The main character, Lee Harker, right? She's such a victim during the whole movie that you don't really use her to see the horror context, for example, if we want to try to defend that argument, like a big horror overall context. This big overall horror context doesn't fully work because there are elements of it that, as I said, don't work, such as Nicolas Cage, right? So there's no characters. There are like weaknesses in the characters. There are weaknesses in the overall context. But at the end of the day, I like the movie. That's sort of the thing. That's sort of like the thing, and that is my own sort of like a big climax reveal at the end of the thriller that has been this episode. That I like the movie, but these elements these like dissonating elements, I cannot ignore them. I just can't. I can't ignore them because they are like so obvious. They are so obvious. But in the end, then what is the answer to my own riddles? Why do I like this movie? Because even though I see flaws everywhere, as a whole, I think it's a movie that has character. As I said, I don't really dig the twist into the supernatural at the end, but that is generally a style that I do like. And the one thing that made the movie way more enjoyable is that I came to it as a horror movie. I didn't came to it as a detective story or like as a thriller. I came to it as a horror movie, which basically gives the barely minimum necessary support, right, to the big reveal of the supernatural element to it. It does. It does. Because in your mind, you already accepted that as a possibility. Even if the movie didn't portray it accurately or like in a good enough way for you to sort of like see it in the movie, you are filling that blanks with your own sort of like preconceived notions about it being a horror movie, which is all good and like because at the end the ultimate experience between you and any movie or product is between you and the product. Like I love talking about it. That's what I'm trying to do every week. I love talking about it. But in the end, I can't be there with anyone watching the movie trying to convey these ideas. But I hope that in some way anyone that listens to this sort of understand my own, you could call them detective mechanisms, right? To understand these sort of narrative movies, how they work, how I think they are more enjoyable, how I think they can endanger themselves, right? And ultimately, what makes them enjoyable or not. I think it would be a good exercise for anyone that liked Longlegs to go and watch Silence of the Lambs, like right after it. Hell, even like movies like the Sixth Sense, right? You can talk trash about Shyamalan for ages, but the Sixth Sense is like a masterpiece almost in thriller narratives. Like I don't believe anyone, but anyone that told me before, and this is a big spoiler from 20 something years ago, I don't believe anyone that tells me that they figured out that Bruce Willis was a ghost during that movie. I don't believe it. I don't believe anyone who said me that because that movie is so well made and all of the elements that I have mentioned here are so well played, like the characters, right? The world building, the case. Like everything is so well done that it's nothing short of a thriller masterpiece. Just knowing when to start, when to stop talking, just knowing what to show and not what to show, knowing when to push too much into the supernatural or not. Like I don't know, it just works. And I think that experiencing this sort of like pinnacle of these narratives, Sixth Sense, Old Boy, Silence of the Lambs, you know, Blade Runner, like it should give you enough perspective to go back to Longlegs, like to see, yeah, it's a good try, it does a lot of good stuff. I see where they're going, but hmm, there are some cracks in between, right? But anyways, Longlegs, pretty good movie. As any good movie, takes you to a journey of reflection over the genre it's supposed to represent, right? A journey into reflection about your own enjoyment of it. And I guess if that's the case, it still did its job. So kudos on that, right? Gotta be positive sometimes. I'm always positive, especially when I'm trying to think about like training how to do a different accent. I wanted to do a Scottish accent, but I can't. Maybe you need another set of muscles to do like shite. I like that scene in Trainspotting when Renton goes, "What is so good about being Scottish?" Oh, that was so shitty. What is so good about being Scottish? Being Scottish is shite. Oh, that is so bad. That is so bad. I better stop. So, anyways, thank you all for listening to me and my non Scottish accent. Thank you for the continued support. And if you're listening to this like final part of my commentary, I'm gonna give you a big hug. Don't tell the others, okay? Thank you for listening and see you all next time. Bye bye.